of our class. So it was about 5 years ago, and it was at Career Conference, and my mom and we taught a class that has become sort of what is a hot topic in the business world right now, and that is generational leadership. And so 5 years later, we still have people come up to us all the time and comment on that class and say how impacting it was. And so in the past 6 months or so, both of us had found ourselves in different business settings unrelated to Mary Kay, where this was the main topic being discussed. And so we took copious notes, and we thought it was time to revamp and update our class, adding some of this new material. And try as we might, we just can't stop the passage of time. And the poignant reality is that we're right now watching the boomers who knew Mary Kay and were raised by her, phasing out or winding down. And as these next generations move in and take over, how best do we ensure that Mary Kay's wisdom and legacy are handed down intact? So let's start with why there are generational differences. See, it seems that between the ages of 11 and 18, those are very formative years in creating a generational thumbprint, we call it. See, during those years, for the first time, we're deeply influenced by religion, faith, race, gender, and socioeconomic status. In addition, national and global events during these years impact us profoundly. All this influences who you become and how you see the world as you grow older.
At 11, you're just a kid, playing with dolls and Legos. And at 13, you're getting zits and entering puberty. And at 15, you're thinking about driving a car and going on a date. And by 18, you might be choosing which sorority to join, or you could be issued a gun and asked to protect our country. Formative years, wouldn't you agree? Ages 11 to 18. Some kids, naive and sheltered. Some jaded and cynical. Between the ages of 11 and 18, kids develop physically. Also, are being emotionally influenced by what's going on around them. What if you were 11 when Germany declared war? 18 when Japan bombed Hiroshima? What if you were 13 when John F. Kennedy was assassinated? Or age 18 when Jimi Hendrix was playing at Woodstock? At 11, you may have watched the Challenger explode, and you were maybe 18 when personal computers were introduced. What if you were 15 when two kids walked into Columbine High School wearing trench coats and turned it into a sleighing field? What if you were 11 when you watched the Twin Towers explode on the TV screen? All of these events impacted the world. But during the formative years of 11 through 18, they also became the framework through which that generation sees the world for the rest of their lives.
So another interesting phenomenon about generations is that historically, the characteristics of the generations repeat themselves in a cycle. So there really are only 4 groups, and then they repeat. So for example, what we would call the GI generation, who was deeply influenced by the World Wars and the Great Depression, actually has many similarities to what we would call the Gen Yers today. There are also what I will call fringe people, who were born either at the beginning or the end of a generational grouping. And they may lean in either direction, or at times they may have characteristics of both generations by which they were influenced.
I think the danger in any kind of generational study is to learn about the generational tendencies and then either use them as an excuse or just to learn about them but not know what to do with that knowledge. So we're hoping that today you'll not only get a clearer understanding of the generations, but we're going to give you some practical tips on how to better understand and work with each generational group in your Mary Kay business. So during our class today, we hope you'll laugh a little and we hope you'll learn a lot. First, let's define the different generations with something fun. How about a fashion show? show.
Okay. So, to represent the GI generation, let's first bring up Rosie the Riveter with a round of applause. Born from 1901 to 1924. In her younger years, Rosie found herself wearing pants and working in a machine shop because the men were called to war. In her lifetime, she saw the invention of radio, airplanes, and automobiles. Rosie usually was waving an American flag because her generation is marked by hard work, patriotism, loyalty, respect for authority, and a strong sense of civic responsibility. Because they dealt with tremendous crisis, and because of their experiences in the Great Depression, many people from this generation carry the fear that everything could come crashing down at any minute. As a result, they saved, avoided debt, and spent as little as possible. 8 U.S. presidents are from this generation. Another important person to all of us was born in this generation, Mary Kay Ash, who entered our world in 1918. By the way, the slogan emblazoned above Rosie in magazine ads read, "We can do it." Even though I never met Mary Kay, I know she echoed that generational belief. Can you almost hear her voice say, "You can do it"? Remember also that because generations are cyclical, Gen Yers will mirror Mary Kay's generation. Today, we're combining Rosie's generation with what is sometimes called the silent generation. So let's welcome to our stage Silent Sally. To the platform, welcome Silent Sally. Okay, who do you know in your life, 65 or older? Can you write down a couple of names of people who belong in this group? See, the women and men of this generation were shaped during their formative years by the Great Depression, World War II, and the bombing of Hiroshima. These are the parents of the baby boomers and my grandparents. Television became a part of life in their adult years, and they are characterized in their work by their loyalty. Often they quietly worked their entire lives for the same company. They were presented a gold watch at their retirement celebrations. They worked hard to make our lives better.
Now let's talk about my generation, the baby boomers. We were born between the years of 1946 and 1964. Boomers are now between the ages of 47 and 65, and they make up about 27% of our total population today. Some famous boomers: Bill Gates, the late Steve Jobs, Donald Trump, Steven Spielberg, and Oprah Winfrey. An interesting fact to note is that as children, only 2% of boomers were ever in institutional daycare. One theory is that because the boys of this generation were so connected to their moms, they later rebelled against the men in authority. You have to be my age to remember how dads reacted when their sons came home with ponytails and bell-bottoms. But I have to say, there was a little rebellion in the women of this generation as well. Welcome to our stage, Brenda the Boomer. In the early years of her life, this was our Brenda. It looks like Brenda walked right out of my college closet, in fact. Now, we boomers were influenced during our formative years by the Vietnam War, the Kent State protests, and the draft dodgers. We participated in Woodstock as well as the civil rights and women's liberation movements. We watched the assassination of JFK, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy. Eventually, we grew out of being rebellious teenagers and changed the workplace dramatically. We have another model to represent Brenda, and this one is from later in her life. And as boomers entered the career world, let's bring her in, our generation changed more than its clothing. adults. You know, we figured stuff out on our own. Typically, we disliked feedback from people in authority like our bosses, but we created and embraced the annual review, complete with documentation to ensure the security of our jobs. We also can be extremely competitive and have a deep desire to continue to move up the ladder of a career we choose. We invented and lived the 70, 80-hour work week, and we are slavishly devoted to our watches and calendars. Another important value of boomers is face time. If we don't see you working, if you aren't punching in and putting in hours at the office, then we don't actually think you're working. This is why in Mary Kay, we boomers value the weekly sales meeting so much. And our tools are those weekly plan sheets, used to be summary sheets, I believe. Oh, so sorry. No, I meant online accomplishment sheets. That's what I meant. No, we are masters at planning weeks and even months in advance, and we're a very organized and group-oriented generation. We were the Girl Scouts and the sorority girls and the cheerleaders. We didn't have organized sports for women, but some young women organized sit-ins and anti-war rallies, and they joined the Peace Corps. Often the younger generations get flack for having lousy money management skills, when really they learned everything they know from their boomer parents, who were known as the me generation. If they did finally learn the value of savings, a large percentage of boomers are finding themselves unprepared for retirement with vanishing pensions and shrinking 401k accounts.
So now let's meet Gina, the Gen Xer. Give her a round of applause as she comes in. Come on, Jeanie. That's Jeanie. Awesome. Kemp and Jeanie are coming up. Gina, I love the music. That's perfect. Gina was born between 1965 and 1981, and now is between the ages of 29 and 43. She was impacted by historical events like Watergate, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Challenger explosion, and the PC boom. People in this generation were the first latchkey kids. Both of their parents worked for the first time in history. They lived during years of rising divorce rates, and they developed a deep distrust of institutions like marriage and government. They are extremely self-reliant and depend mostly on their friends for advice and help. The founders of Google, Amazon, and eBay are all from this generation. Financially, they buy everything with a card. Green beans to blue jeans. They even finagle down payments on houses and cars to get points. 47% of this group is living paycheck to paycheck with nothing left over to save, and 35% believe they will continue to be deeply in debt for the rest of their lives. In the workplace, our Gen Xers value open communication. Because of the absence of their boomer parents in their lives, they want a work-life balance, not interested in a 60-hour work week with rigid hours. While a boomer might see an opportunity for a promotion to a job in a new location as a huge victory because they're moving up the career ladder, a Gen Xer would be wary of this kind of opportunity because of the impact it might have on her family life. Thank you so much, Gina. And now it's time for Gianna, the Gen Wire. Come on up, Gianna. Give Gianna a big round of applause. Gen Wires range in age from 28 to 11. Their formative years, and think about this, they were full of senseless terrorism. They witnessed the Oklahoma City bombings, 9/11, Columbine, the Virginia Tech shootings. They also watched Clinton's impeachment and grew up during an unprecedented bull market and pro-child culture. While some may snidely call them the flip-flop generation. They have simply responded deeply to the randomness of the happenings in their youth by being eager to live each day to its fullest. See, Gen Yers don't look at things long-term, but they want a challenge that is fulfilling in the here and now because they learned early on that there is no guarantee for tomorrow. They also don't just use technology. They live and breathe through it. TGIF, Twitter, Google, iPhones, and Facebook are woven into every part of their daily lives. The only people that they ever actually call are their parents. Everyone else gets a text or a Facebook message. Technology has taught them, and this is so interesting too, that they can trust someone without ever having a face-to-face interaction. They don't have to sit down with someone to get acquainted when they can do that online or via text. See, Gen Yers follow strong causes, not institutions. For instance, they aren't loyal to a particular denomination or religion, but they will give deeply to a church that they attend if they believe in the leadership and in the cause of that church. They're also extremely loyal to a cause if, on their own, they come to the conclusion that it's a worthwhile one. They also have a very low tolerance. Directors that were at Nathan's training yesterday will really understand this. They have a very low tolerance for plateauing. They cannot plateau for very long or they will move on. They cannot tolerate it for very long. I was sitting next to Chelsea during his class yesterday and she said, "This is how long I can plateau." And she held her fingers up like this. Okay? Unlike boomers and Gen Xers who distrust their parents and authority, Gen Yers love their parents. They always ask mom and dad before making a career move and often interact with them daily, even as adults. A friend of mine who works in a hospital recently told me that they had a Gen Yer come to a job interview with her mom. Her mom truly came with her to the job interview. She did not get the job, but she came. As far as money is concerned, they buy a lifestyle. When talking to young people in high school or college, or when going to debt counseling, they have the biggest disconnect with how money works because of their parents. See, their parents bought them the newest of everything, and many times this was guilt shopping. A boomer might say, "I won't buy myself a $400 iPhone," but ask the kid in high school how much hers cost, and she'll often respond, "I don't know, my mom and dad paid for it." See, 18 to 24-year-olds, however, are the fastest growing group of bankruptcy filers. They use credit cards as temporary loans to get new appliances, carpet, even flat-screen TVs to get through because they're suffering without them on their first years on their own. They plan to pay it off when they get married. I'd say 8 out of 10 purchases that they make go on a credit card. I would say it was higher than that, actually, just with my personal experience. 3 lattes, they'll buy $3 lattes, and everything, groceries, everything that they purchase goes onto a card. In the workplace, Gen Yers are most committed to relationships and purpose. Everything has to have a cause. See, the purpose of the work is more important than the profitability of the work. They don't want set hours, and in fact, they won't even apply for jobs if they are defined by their hours. So if it says 60 hours a week, they won't even apply for it. However, unlike their predecessors, the Gen Xers, they don't mind blending their life and their work. They're unquestionably the biggest thinkers in our culture's history. They want to be coached and not told what to do. They loathe wasting time or long lectures as they enjoy the process of self-discovery more than memorization or rote learning. Also, they value constant feedback from their superiors, and they love boomer mentors who will coach them. However, they don't see having a job as some sort of privilege, and they'll move on quickly if it doesn't serve their purpose or if they aren't being challenged. In fact, a study done by USA Today showed that out of 95% of Gen Yers who found a job in their preferred field, 82% of them left it within 2 years. Thank you, Gianna. And how about if we give all of our models a huge round of applause? in each generation we have. So can I have you stand if you would see yourself as either from the GI generation or if you were the silent generation. So that would be the World War II generation. We have any here? We do. Can we give her a big round of applause? Boomers. Can we have the boomers in the crowd stand?
And some of you know that before becoming a national, my unit did those many unit clubs and over $1 million in retail production twice, and some directors asked, how'd you do the million? And the $1 million directors asked, how'd you become a national? And I always smile and explain that creating a $1 million unit in a national area for me was a 23-year journey. It didn't really happen in 1 year. However, there were a few factors that contributed to exponential growth, and I'm going to tell you that when Amy started working her business about 10 years ago, that's when our unit made that big jump from the $450,000 unit club to the $750,000, which was the first of 8 trip-taking years in a row. And I often said that when Amy got serious about Mary Kay, I felt I needed to show her all the rewards and opportunities that the company had to offer, and I had a new purpose for working my business. That's also when, as a Gen Y daughter, she started questioning how I did things and why I did things in a way that only daughters can talk to their moms. Trust me, she never hesitated to tell me exactly what she thought of the contests and the promotions and the skincare class procedures. There may have been some mildly irritating moments, but she didn't allow me to stay stagnant and do the things the way I always did, which is a notorious characteristic of my generation. Why change something if it isn't broken? Slow to change, that would be me.
And I was born right on the cusp between the Gen Xers and the Gen Yers, but I have far more characteristics of Gen Y than Gen X. So I will be the voice of Gianna, the Gen Yer today. And again, the purpose of this class is awareness, because sometimes we experience people that aggravate or frustrate or confuse us in building a Mary Kay business. And we aren't really even sure why they're bugging us. And with awareness comes patience and acceptance. And if you understand what the cause of the friction is, you can then become more tolerant of the cause. Case in point, my mom and I argued and bickered our way through the creation of this class 5 years ago, and we did it again in the past few weeks as we revamped it. She wouldn't let me put it on a Google Doc that we both could edit at the same time because that was too confusing. So I had to explain 42 times that you have to open the email attachment, make the changes, save it to your computer, then create an email, send it back to me as an attachment. And I think she finally got it by the 10th draft. I think it was 8, actually. And I don't need to know how. All I have to do is make enough money to pay somebody else to do it for me. Today, we've got 3 main areas that we'd like to cover. First, there are lessons that in Mary Kay we simply must learn from the GI and silent generations. We must not abandon the legacy these women in Mary Kay created for us. Second, we're going to address the clash of the boomers and the Gen Yers, which is hugely evident in Mary Kay right now. But not on this stage. Finally! We're going to talk about what we feel is needed to train and retain the generations that will be the future of Mary Kay. Let's
start with honoring the GI generation. My niece got married a few weeks ago. The day after the wedding, I called my mom to rehash the wedding. Now, my mom's 91, and I'm telling her how great the pictures are, and I said, oh, Amy got some great shots from the balcony, and Ashley's boyfriend had a perfect angle to catch Jada's expression when she was throwing the flower petals. My mom wants to know how I saw those pictures already. And how do you explain Facebook to a 91-year-old? Now, I'm not sure that she's ever going to learn about Facebook, but I know that I have learned so much from her and those in her generation.
And my husband and I are fortunate to have all but one of our grandparents still living. Most of them are in their early 90s, and all 5 sets of our grandparents have been married for over 60 years. A huge influence on us, and we're so grateful for their legacy. In fact, one of the interesting new tidbits we've learned is that Gen Yers connect deeply with people from the GI and silent generations, because remember, they're actually a repeat of the GI generation in that 4-cycle pattern.
I think it's clear to all of us that the GI and silent generations truly put the rest of us to shame in terms of the work ethic. The main reason that they worked so hard throughout their lives is because they grew up during the Great Depression. They learned from a young age that they had to work to survive. And I also believe that's why we repeatedly see first-generation immigrants in our company become so successful. Helena Rydell, a national sales director who lives in the Chicago area, is a great example. She had an economics degree in Poland, but she moved here without her family to make a better life. She started Mary Kay and brought them over here. She was cleaning houses when she found the Mary Kay opportunity. The Latino population is also the fastest growing segment of Mary Kay. Recently, at an emerging leaders event, I sat down at a table of directors who want to be nationals now. One director was from the Dominican Republic, one from Colombia, one from Puerto Rico, and one was born in the U.S., but much of her family's from Mexico. They were all driving Cadillacs with offspring directors, and they were aspiring to become national sales directors. These women reminded me of the GI and silent generations.
And there is no question that the GI and silent generations worked long, hard hours at jobs they might not have liked. And they did it for their families and truly for their daily bread. And I think that many times our grandparents and people from this generation must laugh at us as we strive for balance and harmony in our schedules. They just worked, and they worked hard. And one set of my grandparents owned a grocery store in a small town for 25 years. When I asked Reed, my stepdad, about what that was like growing up with parents who were entrepreneurs, he matter-of-factly said that his parents never left the store before 9 o'clock on a weeknight. Never. For 25 years. His grandma, who lived with them, cooked supper in the back of the store for he and his brother, and they all ate there together. They worked until the job was done, and their kids were expected to help in any way that they could. He started stocking shelves when he was 7 years old. I, on the other hand, drive my 8-year-old around to her dance lessons and her basketball camps, and although she does have chores around our house, I wouldn't think of asking her to work in my office just yet, and I'm not always so sure that's good.
Here's another example. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. They had to quit school to help support their families. When my mom's dad died, there were 7 kids, and my grandma made my mom quit school to go to work to clean houses for 50 cents a week. My mom always regretted having to quit, and she made education a big deal for her 5 kids. All 5 of us graduated from college. 3 of us have master's degrees. My folks worked in a glass factory, and they did without, so they could pay for our college educations. And at one time, 3 kids in college. They never did for themselves. It was always about the kids. My mom and dad had 5 kids. All of us were picky eaters. I can tell you for a fact that they sometimes made 5 different meals for us. And it is. And unlike the health food conscious generation of today, my favorite meal was a deep-fried tenderloin, homemade crinkle-cut French fries, and grape Kool-Aid. They did all of this because they wanted life to be better for us than it had been for them. And they were willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. I also think about our founder, Mary Kay Ash, when I think of this generational category. For Mary Kay, a 10-show week was not a once-a-year phenomenon to celebrate. It was a weekly occurrence. See, her children helped fill and deliver orders. She worked until the job was done. She understood that God first, family second, career third sometimes meant long hours and hard work. When Mary Kay first created the 2020 challenge, that was to do 20 classes in a month, some people in corporate tried to talk her out of it. And she insisted that it wasn't optional, it was a necessity. She believed that a sales director who was doing fewer than 5 classes a week couldn't make it because she didn't have the cash flow to support her family and business from her personal sales. Did you hear that clearly? 5 classes a week. I think somewhere in the last 30 years, we've watered this down. We are the leaders, and we're not working with the passion and the discipline that our founder knew was necessary.
It's also so interesting to me today to see the shift in how we view work and family values. See, as a top director in Mary Kay, one of the most frequent concerns I hear voiced by the women I lead, or women who are thinking about this as a business opportunity for themselves, is whether I get to spend enough time with my kids, or how many hours I work each week. And the questions that they ask are good ones, don't get me wrong, but all are asked with a tinge of doubt about whether a successful Mary Kay career actually hurts our family rather than benefiting it. And somehow in the last 30 to 40 years, we've started to see a dedication to a family business or working long hours to build that business as damaging to our families. And I have to wonder why, when we don't see my grandparents work 30 or 40 years ago in the same way, just as with my grandparents, my business pays for my children's education, for our groceries, and for half of our household expenses. In my grandparents' generation, this kind of work and sacrifice was not only respected, it was admired. No one ever questioned my Grandpa Martin's commitment to his family because he had to work at the store until 9 o'clock every night, even if he didn't sell very much on that particular day. No one would ever question my Grandpa Gura's decision to work overtime at the glass factory to pay for things his family needed. Yet, frequently, I receive questions of this very nature, or I see Mary Kay consultants question their decision to hold skincare classes and to be away from their families for the night, even when they're doing that work for the benefit of their families. See, I've never struggled with the role my business has played in my family because of the generational example set by both my grandparents and my parents, who modeled an incredible work ethic and willingness to sacrifice for our family.
I think the main lesson that we baby boomers have carried on from our parents is to work. Mary Kay is a business, and this career, as any other, is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We can't always expect immediate results. When a director from my generation has lost an offspring director or has a setback in her unit production or in her personal business, she doesn't lay the blame on others. She doesn't expect someone else to do it for her. A common phrase that I'll hear from directors my age is, I know what to do, I'll just get back to work. It's time to pull out the showcase,
Which is not the right term for it.
It doesn't matter. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Get on the phone, and they book some more classes. Now, probably our biggest weakness is we might still be doing the same skincare class. I've seen more than one consultant kind of roll her eyes when we use phrases like check up from the neck up.
That is I'm not ever saying
Check up from the neck up.
That is horrible.
Check up from the neck up. Check up from the neck up. Might be a little dated, but I will mention that in 1988 I started my business doing full circle skincare classes with a flip chart and a pink beauty coat. And while I don't really think it matters if it's a class or a party or a show, if it's with a flip chart or not. What matters is we're back to doing more of those than counting on website orders and on those. Nothing wrong with those, they have a place in our business, but again, I see the emphasis going back to relationship building and holding skincare classes or parties at someone's dining room table or meeting place. It's the table experience that grows our business. And as for time management, let me tell you a little bit about how I built my business as a consultant. For a long time, I had 2 careers. I was a full-time high school English teacher, and I was a consultant and then a director with Mary Kay. And after teaching all day, I didn't always feel like coming home to work my business. But I had a goal to earn some money for a family trip to Europe to visit my brother, and I booked 3 to 5 appointments a week. And I used to say that I had to push my Mary Kay button because sometimes I had a class scheduled at 4 right after school and sometimes another one at 7.
And we loved the Mary Kay button. It was like this. Put your shoes away! Hang up your coat! Get your bag! Jeanie speaking. We were like, really? For real? My kids would always say, you're so nice to them. Not to us.
I also remember that there might have been a time in Amy's Mary Kay career when she was complaining about not having enough money. And I may have said something irritating like, well, then book some appointments.
Or there were some times when you won a really cool prize or got a new car, and I would say, oh, I wish I had that. And you would so kindly remind me that I, too, could hold 3 to 5 appointments a week and work for 10 years in the business to earn it.
And then you would so kindly remind me that it wouldn't take you nearly that long. That part of her story. That's my story. At the time I started my business, I also did laundry and ironing and shopping, and I cooked meals, sometimes doing marathon cooking on Sundays when I'd freeze barbecue and spaghetti and meatloaf for days when I had appointments. There were days that I was so tired, but I kept going. I don't know why. I just felt that's what you did. You worked when you wanted something. Now finally, the piles of laundry in the kids' messy bedrooms and the stacks of profile cards that needed to be filed and written on got to me. And I had some kind of a breakdown, and maybe I yelled kind of loudly about, no one ever help me! Do anything! So, after the breakdowns, I had help. I remember the first time I had a house cleaner. I walked into that sparkling, clean house, and I thought, this is better than sex.
Clearly, no one's parents are having sex.
And when I hired a teenager to help me in my office, there was relief, and I will mention that Amy was that teenager. But I soon realized that her friends were much more reliable than she was. And can I also mention that my daughters, when they had houses of their own and full-time jobs, had not a qualm about hiring a housekeeper. Now my mom, she was in her 80s when she finally allowed me to pay for a housekeeper for her. Now we baby boomers stick with the job. If you notice, there are many women from my generation who have been in this company for 15, 20, 30 plus years. I taught at the same high school for 25 years. My husband has been an insurance agent for over 30 years. My other daughter, Nikki, is in corporate America and has jumped around to companies without a second thought. She moved 7 times in 5 years. My generation of consultants and directors are the ones who are in the Queen's Court of Sales. I've been in it probably 14 times, I think. We give great customer service. In fact, a few times I earned the court on reorders from clients that I've had for years.
And I can say for sure that I know my mom's Mary Kay business wasn't just something that was created overnight. She really did do, like I said last night, thousands of skincare classes and facials in our basement. And those table experiences, and the fact that she got down on her hands and knees and walked 2 miles in the snow, and then to fill orders from the bottom which our national area was built. And I know that she must have been exhausted many nights when she came home after teaching all day and had to do those faces before she headed off to cheer for us at a volleyball or basketball game. But here's the thing I want you to hear most clearly. Just as Reed never doubted his parents' dedication to his family as they ran the grocery store, never once do I remember feeling slighted or damaged by their hard work and dedication to their businesses. They invested deeply in my sister and I, and we knew, and so will your kids, that their work was for us. See, hard work of this kind, it just never hurts your family when the intention is that you're doing it for them. So when you're tempted to wonder, don't, because hard work with a purpose will never hurt your family. Okay, so let's move on to our second major point, and that is that there seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding and some friction between the boomers and the Gen Yers, which I find completely fascinating because you are the ones who created us. So, let's talk about why these two groups just can't seem to get along.
Okay, I went to my 5-year-old grandson's soccer game last week. Now, I'm laughing as I watch their two little teams, they're chasing after the ball and half of them not knowing which way to go. And I'm cheering as Anthony makes a goal. And I'm startled as I look over and his coach is texting someone. And it's not just once that he texts. Now, that bothered me. He's supposed to be paying attention to my grandson.
And ironically, the next week, I was texting her while at Anthony's game to tell her about his 5 goals.
No, you got 5 in mine. When I was there, I got 5 goals. 5.
Anyhow. And she didn't even get the text until the next day when she bothered to look at her.
I was just excited the next day. Okay, so how about this one? I'm at a Mary Kay end-of-the-year banquet, and there's a speaker, mind you. This is not a training class. Someone's giving a little talk. And in the audience and at the head table, some directors are on their phones or even their iPads, presumably taking notes. Not. I was a high school English teacher, and we didn't have those, but I know you are not taking notes. Incredibly rude, says this boomer.
And I say 2 things. First, I am listening, even as I text or email, and I'm probably texting someone who's in the same room about what's being said.
Yeah, how dumb is that?
Anyhow, second, and this is very important that you hear this. Please don't talk for so long without giving us a chance to respond or interact somehow. If you engage us, then we won't have to pull out our phones to check them or to text them about what is happening, because we just cannot listen to someone talk for so long. We're our whole lives. We've been engaged in a constant conversation with those around us. We've been online via Facebook or Twitter or through our phones, and we've been conditioned to constantly communicate, and in so many ways at the same time. If you then put us in a setting like you're in right now, where we have to look at one person behind a microphone who's far away from us talking, and we're going to get distracted by other conversations that are at our fingertips. And I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because my mom will start yelling, but if I did, there would be Gen Yers in this very room who have already texted while we've been talking together.
They put it away when I yell. Okay, alright, boomers, seriously, don't you have to just count to 10 because you just get so dang irritated with them? Now, you have to remember that you raised these creatures. You probably bought their first cell phone, didn't you? Now, it's a generational difference. I really think, and I'm trying to deal with it, but I'm still going to tell you that texting while I'm talking, it's rude.
in our culture, people are either superstar athletes or dangerously obese. I think that we either totally nail this area or we miserably fail. So let's talk about a superstar Mary Kay athlete who we've heard a lot about in Mary Kay, Daisha Beacon. Which, honestly, when we wrote this class 5 years ago, these were the exact words, which is so funny because now she's here. So Daisha, we're going to have you come on up here. National Sales Director to debut in company's history. She had her baby after her debut. When she was telling her story, it could have said Gen Y over the top of it. She could have been carrying a banner. It was so Gen Y. But I want to talk about the first years when you were building your business as a consultant and then as a new director. And how many classes a week did you average?
I averaged about 3 to 5 a week.
Okay. 3 to 5 a week. Classes, groups of people. Okay. How many hours a week would you say that you worked in those first years of building your business?
The first 3 months, about 6 to 8 hours a week, and then it moved up to about 15 to 25. And then when I moved into the top director level, about 40 to 60.
And did you take a lot of vacations? Did you have a lot of time off?
No, I did not take a vacation. I treated it like a real business. I probably didn't take a vacation for about 2 years.
Okay. So can we give her a round of applause? So much better because she's here. But I think that we all want to achieve what Daisha achieved, or worse, we feel like failures because we haven't. But are we really working like she worked? And for how long? So I'm going to pause and take a little survey, just so I have an idea of who I'm talking to. No matter what generation, so from any generation, I want you to participate, and you're going to have to estimate quickly in your mind, and don't get caught up in exact numbers. I'm a C. I know it causes me a great deal of stress. But just estimate in your mind, like I'm going to ask you to stand. If since July 1st, I want you to think of an average of how many classes a week you've held since July 1st. So this seminar year, okay? Average. Again, if you missed a week, it's an average. So C's, just figure it quickly. Giving you time. Stand if you'd say, on average, I held at least 1 class a week since July 1st, if you can stand. Give them a round of applause. Okay, so we may see a minute, 2 classes a week. 2 classes a week on average. How about how many of you think 3 classes a week on average? Okay? How about 4 classes a week on average? Okay? How about 5 classes a week? Would somebody say 5? We've got just a few with 4 or 5 and over here. Okay. Give them a round of applause. But see, what I believe is that most of us want the awards and the prizes and the money and the accolades, but we're not really working our Mary Kay businesses at that level. And I think we aren't so willing to work this way for ourselves or in our Mary Kay business, because in sales, the results aren't always immediate. And Gen Myers, we have been raised to expect immediate gratification. We've had microwaves, remote controls, computers. How about the internet? We've been conditioned to expect things to respond immediately. We push a button, we get an immediate response. Okay? And that's not always how Mary Kay works. And that can frustrate us.
I just heard Jordan Halou, that's Gen Y daughter of National Sales Director Kathy Halou, on a conference call. And she said Mary Kay is the hardest thing she ever did. She was driving a Cadillac and wanted to quit Mary Kay because she wasn't moving fast enough. Now her mom and dad, totally exasperated, finally said, go ahead. But her mom said, you have to do it after you earn a gold medal. Because Mary Kay herself said you quit at a high point, never a low point. And of course, those 5 that Jordan sponsored were a springboard, and she doubled her production in a year from $416,000 to the $832,000 Circle of Excellence.
And I can totally relate. I wasn't the only daughter of a national on the top director trip in Maui who had a similar story. The 2 or 3 years after I quit teaching were financially tight for my family. I didn't quit teaching and immediately earn a 6-figure income in Mary Kay, and those years were challenging for me. It was sometimes scary, and it wasn't fun to take a dip in my income. I also didn't work like Daisha did, or I probably would have. What I did do was about 2 classes a week consistently, and my income did grow to reflect the work that I had invested, and the efforts that I made have built a top unit in Mary Kay, and I have been rewarded financially for my efforts. However, I worked many hours in the past few years in which I haven't seen an immediate paycheck from my investment of time.
And if memory serves me, there were several times when you were frustrated that it seemed to take so long, and you questioned if you'd ever reach that point. And if I can remember Reed and I reminding you what a nice house that you live in, even if you didn't have drapes, and how well you've done, because the only debt you have is the mortgage on your house. And the fact that everything else is paid off, and you're driving a pink Cadillac, and that's a perk of real value. And we reminded you it took time and continued work efforts to reach the financial level that you wanted and felt that you deserved.
And I do deserve it. You taught me that. It is one of the strengths of my generation. We have no issues with deserving.
The fact that Mary Kay does not provide a guaranteed wage can be a problem. I'm always baffled that people are so resistant to joining our company for fear that it might be a get-rich-quick scheme. And then the second they join, they want to make all kinds of money. And they don't want to do the work that kind of, to make that money. And the fact that Mary Kay is a simple business, but not always an easy business, that's the frustration. I've seen many young women like Amy and Jordan who are challenged by the Mary Kay opportunity. Some were A students in college. They competed in sports in high school. They led student organizations. They hit home runs. And when they started their Mary Kay career, it seemed simple, but it wasn't always easy because they weren't immediately superstars. This has really struck me lately. Confident young women who get so upset that they are an overnight success.
And I can remember being at my first seminar as a sales director, and I had attempted something that I would never recommend. I had my first baby who screamed all day and all night for a year, worked another job, and experienced my first year as a sales director at the same time. And we were sitting way up in the balcony. And I had one name badge on my name tag. And my mom was in the front row seats. And she had her name badges dragging to the floor. And I was furious and mad and frustrated, and I was broke, and I hated being average, and I hated not doing what I knew I was capable of doing. And I can remember going back to the hotel and sobbing and yelling at my mom, saying that the answer was not to hold more skincare classes, and that the clean score sales was not possible for anyone of my age, and that something must be wrong with me, because I couldn't do it, and she'd done it so many times. And I don't look back at that seminar and think, gosh, that was a really fun seminar.
Oh, and if I could just interject a little bit about that one, this was not exactly my favorite seminar either. Do you remember? And I mentioned that I was on the floor. It was a great year for me. Okay, what fun and sorrows there are when your daughter is an offspring director. Yes.
But what I will tell you is that it was a turning point seminar, because sometimes you just have to get mad to make a change. And sometimes you have to watch someone who's in your unit, who's been sitting next to you for a long time, or someone who just joined, and maybe you've been in your red jacket for a long time, and she comes in and goes in Target for her car in 1 month. Or you just have to watch some new little hotshot director join and do $1 million in her first year, become national sales director faster than anyone else in the whole company. And that could really get you moving if you let that frustration propel you into action. See, it's what you do when you're disappointed or frustrated that makes the difference. So let me tell you a quick story about what happened after that seminar. At Leadership Conference in January, I connected with a leader by the name of Buffy Camry, who I'd met and befriended previously at DIT Week. And and Buffy had been in the business the same amount of time that I had. And she and I had similar life circumstances, and we had a conversation at Leadership Conference. It was at a party, and it changed my life. We were talking about where we were and what our goals were for the next 6 months. So this is January, right? And the seminar year ends at the end of June. And Buffy says that she and her unit are going to qualify for their very first Cadillac by March, which is 3 months later. So I said, wow, where are you? Like, what do you have in for this first quarter, for these first 3 months? And it was the same as my unit. And inside, I scoffed. I was like, yeah, right. They're going to earn their Cadillac. There is no way that that's possible. And 3 months later, it was March, and on a whim, I happened to pop onto Buffy's website to see that she and her unit had, in fact, finished that Cadillac. And I'll never forget that night as long as I live. I sat at my computer and I cried for a long time because I hadn't believed and she had. And that was the only difference. And I cried and I cried, and then something really shifted inside of me. And 3 months later, we picked up the keys to our first Cadillac. And Buffy and I, we got to walk across that seminar stage together and pick up the keys. And Buffy, I am serious when I say that your belief and your excellence is one of the main reasons that I am here today. If you hadn't finished that Cadillac, I wouldn't have cried. And I wouldn't have repented for my unbelief. And I wouldn't have believed that Cadillac and so much more is possible. Do you see that? You don't even know who your success impacts. Buffy didn't finish her Cadillac for me, but it's so many more people than you'll ever know. And so what does that kind of frustration do to you? Does it motivate you to work, or do you retreat?
Do we sales directors have goals that we desperately wanted and didn't get? Sure, lots of times. What do? Want to be a team leader by retreat, miss that goal? Want to be a director, I'm not. Was on target for a car, fell off. Want a car, and keep up the production. It's okay to be disappointed and lick your wounds a little, but so many people just quit. They give up. The question that has to be asked is, how badly do you want it? See, I can remember calling relatives of mine. I was asking for a reorder, and they thought they'd hung up the phone, and I heard their scathing comments about me bugging them about my cake. Like, who would use that stuff? I remember how red my face got, how embarrassed, and then angry, and then hurt I felt. And now, years later, by the way, they're younger than I am, I'd have to say, my skin, my Mary Kay skin, looks a whole lot better. Now, you might do that booking with the boss's wife, with your sister-in-law, with your coworker. It's not always easy when your best friend, who would be the most awesome consultant ever, says no thanks. Your cousin says, quit calling, and your favorite client switches to Bare Minerals. Or worse, she now has a friend that sells Mary Kay, so she's going to buy from her. It all happens. But you are still putting yourself out there anyway? That's the question.
And if you want to take something positive from we in the Gen Y group, take our unrestrained, uninhibited, unwavering faith that anything is possible. Or, Mary Kay's words, we can do it. We don't believe that you have to have a certain amount of experience to achieve certain goals. Baby boomers, you taught us that. You created us. You wanted us to be this way. And I've heard lots of talk about trying to make yourself more appealing to younger generations by changing what you wear and how you talk. And this isn't what's going to attract us to you. Remember this, we love our parents. We refer to our parents on everything, all important decisions. We love feedback from anyone, but your mentoring, your wisdom, and your leadership.
And boomers, there are so many different scenarios for women our age. Some of you say you're tired of working. You've been with Mary Kay for 20, 30 years. You've held classes, schlepped those bags, done career talks, built a strong unit and customer base. So in those moments, when you say you're tired, I believe that's not entirely true. I believe that it's not that you're physically tired of the work. You're tired of not being where you want to be. You say, I've done all that. You've lost your dream, your oomph, your passion, because you're questioning the belief you're questioning is in you. Another ironic twist for some, Mary Kay was supposed to be just for fun, something for the extras, and then the economy tanked. What happened to your retirement funds? You were supposed to be set for life. Now you're back to working because you have to. I became a national, and the company says I have to retire. Remember, baby boomers have never really liked or totally trusted the establishment. We do have a bit of a rebel, and maybe that's why I'm saying, what do you mean I have to retire? You're telling me to give up my pink cars, seminars, world-class trips, diamond rings, and stage appearances in front of thousands. Give it up and do what? What in the world will I do that compares to that lifestyle if I retire? Should I spend the day in my little trophy house? Now, I might like a lifestyle shift, but I'm not ready to retire. However, I've also heard she's so outdated. All she talks about is what she used to do. You know, that walk 10 miles to the school barefoot in the winter. Okay, that syndrome. But in Mary Kay, it's the I held 10 classes in a week and booked every hostess syndrome. See, Gen Yers, they don't want to hear it. Respect is earned for them, not just because of an age or a title. What are you doing now is the question.
And this I would agree with 100%. Please don't tell me what you did 30 years ago or even 15 when I know your business hasn't grown or changed in the past 10. And don't assume that a Gen Xer or a Gen Yer will automatically be impressed or awed simply by a position or a title or a knit suit. Those things mean very little to us. At a recent Mary Kay event for sales directors, I watched as copies of Mary Kay autobiographies were handed out to all of the attendees. The books were given to us by the nationals who were there so that we could have them sign our books, autograph them. And I stood back and watched the room through a generational lens. Boomers practically ran to get in line to have the nationals sign their books. They can hardly wait to talk to some of those women, and they idolize them. And I still hear my mom today, as a national sales director, constantly talk about how awed she is by some of the leaders who wear NSD suits. She wonders if they'll like her, or if she's worthy of the position, or if she'll fit in on national trips. And as I watched that room and watched people lining up for autographs, I was deeply concerned that so few Gen Yers were even there. See, somehow we're missing the best leaders of my generation. The ones who were there were mostly daughters of the nationals or of other directors in the room. And I can assure you that we were not asking for autographs from our moms. Why are there so few Gen Y leaders?
I did have a very long line.
But why are there so few Gen Yers in Mary Kay who are achieving big things? So much of what Gen Yers desire is available to us in Mary Kay. We love to blend our work with our lives. We want freedom. We want purpose. We need a cause. At a recent Chicago Directors Executive Steering Committee meeting, I even noticed that of the 35 directors in the Chicago area who did Unit Club last year, only 4 were under the age of 35. That is a glaring problem. And we have to connect with this next generation if we want to do what Mary Kay asked us to do, to pass this opportunity on.
There are pockets of young developing leaders in Mary Kay. Maybe Dacia's area would be an example. Obviously Stacy's area. But overall, when 1/3 of the nationals retire in the next 5 years, who's going to fill that gap? Who's going to lead Mary Kay into the future? And since we've spent so little time addressing the Gen Xers in the room, here's a special call to you. One of the main things we've learned about Gen X is that you are the connecting link between these two warring generations. Many of the speakers that we listened to suggested putting Gen Xers in charge of multi-generational committees. They have enough of each in them, and they can create a healthy balance of the two. You can lead in both directions most effectively. This reminds me of a new school that was built in our area. A young principal got to do the hiring, and he chose all young teachers because of their creativity and enthusiasm and energy, and it was a disaster because no one had the experience of working with parents. They didn't value the importance of discipline, and they weren't willing to spend hours after school preparing and working with committees. When the bell rang, they walked out the door. Think about our Mary Kay career when you built a new unit. Could you have done it without the encouragement and wisdom of a seasoned mentor, a national or two, someone with bloody knees? Some young directors fly through with charisma and enthusiasm, sponsoring all the girls their age. Keep in mind, that's a generation that might not stay. They learn what's valuable, they leave. If it gets hard, they might move on. Hard is an interesting word when defined by that Y generation.
But we're not all bad. We will work with great passion and dedication and stamina and sacrifice if you give us a cause that is connected with our work. See, we won't do it just to fund a 401k account, but if we're part of something bigger, if you have a vision for impact that is going to make a difference, we will. In fact, we're desperate for that kind of mission. Give us something to be a part of. We still sacrifice deeply for things we believe in.
And this is why Mary Kay has an edge over other business opportunities. Financially, we have an opportunity. Mary Kay also has a mission to change women's lives. And that's why I have women still with me after 23 years. But here's the caution. Just as other business and church leaders have to update and change to grow, so do Mary Kay directors. It's too easy to become stagnant when we lose belief and purpose. Are we the ones who talk about what should be done, or are we the ones willing to continue to do it? We boomers have to acknowledge that our way might not be the only way. And maybe we have to change our intentions when we're holding classes and be passionate about holding classes to find more young women to pass Mary Kay on to. It's hard sometimes for boomers to let go of control and authority. The marriage of the two generations, the willingness to learn from each other can be the answer. I'll learn to text to get bookings if you'll promise that when I'm speaking, you put that phone in your purse.
And I'll put my phone in my purse on silent, and I won't even look at it when that little red light is flashing, calling my name. If you'll learn how to text, and you'll use that as a way to coach and mentor me.
And I'll agree that you can multitask, but when you have music blaring, you're on email, instant messaging, checking a text, and talking on the phone at the same time, I'm never going to believe that you're able to discern what's important.
But you'll also concede that some of your conversations on IM are the most potent and powerful coaching you do, even if they happen at 11 o'clock at night.
Okay, how about this one? I'll buy a Kindle, but I'll never read a leadership book on it because there's such value in a pink marker and written notes in my handwriting and margin. And flipping from the front to the back because the pages are wall-papered.
And I'll respect your title and your position and your suit deeply when you engage with me and mentor me in a meaningful way. When you have a mission you're committed to right now, not 10 years ago, that is compelling and real and that I can be a part of.
I'll read your emails and IMs and texts, but you won't find those hanging on my refrigerator. My handwritten note will be.
I'll offer my new consultant training to out-of-town consultants via a really cool website called OOVOO.com, where up to 6 people can connect at once. Ask me about it later if you have lots of out-of-town consultants and you can't find a great adopting meeting for them. But I'll also follow my mom's lead and have my local new consultant training gathered around a table so I can talk about their kids and their jobs and hear what they have to share. And I'll connect my meeting and my offspring directors meeting via Uvu, which is so fun, so we can have a community text booking blitz and we'll book 50 appointments in one night in our efforts.
You go ahead. Skype your weekly meetings, ooh, your trainings, but I'm going to continue to stand at the door and give a hug. I'm going to look her in the eye and see the fear, the disappointment, or the joy, and I'm going to give her hand a squeeze or bring her up front and know what to say.
And I'll come to Mary Kay meetings and events faithfully if you'll make them more interactive and you don't just talk at me. If you let me interact and learn from those dialogues, give me time to respond and to get and give feedback.
And I'll step out from behind the podium and learn to put my consultants into small groups so they can solve issues they're facing in the field. And I'll implement think tanks into my fall retreat where we ask for feedback on different business items like hostess programs and contests and skincare class procedures, because I'm learning that I can learn as much as I can give at events like this.
Finally, if you won't brush it off as just another confusing technology, I'll teach you how to understand that Facebook is not just another communication tool to bog you down, but probably the most effective recruiting tool we have. It's a living, breathing dream book, and the way we're going to communicate with Gen Yers most effectively. Some of the most powerful consultants in my unit right now are a part of Mary Kay because of my Facebook wall.
And you can go ahead and tag all your Facebook posts, but it's going to be my photograph that I had printed and wrote a message on the back and mailed in an envelope that's going to be in a frame on her desk or glued to her goal poster.
See, what we both want most of all, my mom and I with all of our bantering, is to fulfill a God-given mission through this business. When we look at how it has changed our lives so dramatically, when I think about how many women are simply surviving dull, lifeless, dreamless days, I get this deeply urgent feeling inside of me. We have to share this opportunity. We have to. Not because of the benefits for us and our families, but for them. And 10 years ago, about a month after I'd started my business, I asked one of my students to help me in my office. Jen was one of my favorites, so everyone knows teachers aren't allowed to have favorites. But she came and worked in my laundry room / office. And about a year later, she joined my team and helped me earn my very first Mary Kay car just by selling to a few people in her life. She piddled with her business through college and always maintained her consultant status, but never did anything more. She contacted me 2 years ago to help with her wedding makeup, and shortly after that, she contacted me about really starting to work her business more actively. A true Gen Yer, Jen has become a top consultant in my unit and earned her first car at the end of July. 2 weeks ago, we went to a dealership to pick up that Chevy Malibu, and her mom and dad, though divorced, were there to celebrate along with her team members and her husband. I stood and talked with her dad for a long time. He was so proud of her. He said, Jen's always been so hard on herself, but this has changed her so much for the better. I'm just so proud of her for doing this. 4 days after the car pickup this week, Jen's dad had a massive heart attack at the age of 56 and died. I still can't really believe it. And she called me the morning after he died, very early, to let me know that he had passed away. And she said, all I keep thinking is that I'm so glad he was with us on Thursday to pick up that car. And as I hung up, I thought, what if she hadn't earned the car? There would have been no celebration, no words of praise and pride for her to remember. She asked me to write down what he said in that conversation so she could always remember it. It's so important that we pass on this opportunity, you guys. It's just so important.
Jen's dad was 56 when he died. Steve Jobs, 57. I'm going to be 60. Mary Kay, with her wisdom and vision and work ethic, created a business plan that has been viable for 48 years. Hey, this snot-nosed millennial generation. They may have starkly different attitudes and desires, but if they really do mirror the GI generation that Mary Kay herself was born into, and we're calling them the next great generation, let's figure this out. See, Mary Kay's words keep ringing in my ears. Pass it on. She said, pass it on. If we're going to marry the wisdom of our legendary leaders, the ingenuity of the next generation, we need to attract, mentor, train, and retain them. All of us have a title. You're sitting out there as an independent beauty consultant, an independent sales director, an independent national sales director. Well, along with that title comes your one and only responsibility, and that must be pass